What's up, guys? Welcome to Mixing Fundamentals with a live, I guess, like a accurate example of how we are able to transform a unmixed track into a mixed track. So to give you some overview, mixing is just the way of polishing your song piece by piece to make it sound big, clear, and nice on any sound system that you could potentially play it on. And the way we do by achieving that is just through various techniques such as compression. We can add, different effects on it such as reverb, delay, phasing. We can layer stuff together. We can stereo spread stuff. I put together a sample that I made, and it's in no way mixed that well. And we're basically going to walk through and see how we're going to mix it. So, first, let me rename everything. Cool. Now that we have renamed everything, let's just play through that to show that it is unmixed and it doesn't sound polished. So we have piano 1, piano 2, trumpet, violin, vox pad, vox reel, and bass, and just some drums. So it's a basic hi-hat. Mainly you'd find this in like hip hop or sometimes pop songs. So what we're going to do is we're going to assign every one of these a new mixer track so we can start diving in. A quick way to do that if you don't know, so we're going to open the step sequencer, drag this out a little bit. Make sure we're on the audio tab because these are all audio files, they're not samples. And then we're just going to drag all of these spots here. I don't know what they're called. I think they just select them. We're going to click this down drop, assign to a free mixer track, or Control L, and bam. We already have everything assigned to a mixer track, so half the work's already done. So let's play it real quick. My mistake. Hold on. All right, so now they're all assigned, so let's just play through real quick. The mixing can be preferential. There is a few things that I'd like to change as far as volume wise and like what I really want in front of the mix. In front of the mix meaning things that I hear the most and they're very much in your face. And then there's some things that are in the background, kind of like the vocals will most likely be in the background, but you can still hear them. You notice them. What we're going to do is we're going to try and EQ them. So we'll cut out all the frequencies that we normally clash together. So when frequencies are at the same frequency and they play at the same time, it can make your mix sound muddy, almost distorted to a point, and you can't hear anything else over it. I think the bass is one of them. And part of the piano. So the bass and the piano, I'll actually load up an example here. So this is an EQ. We click here and go down to Fruity Parametric EQ. This is an equalizer. It goes from 20 hertz all the way to 20,000 hertz. That's how much the human ear can hear. And this is for the bass. You can note that by seeing that up there. And then if we go to piano 1, load up the same thing, we have 2 EQs. So I'm just going to solo the piano and the sub so you can see visually, eventually learn how to train your ear to hear it. So you can see around the 200 hertz range, both the piano and the bass are noticeably peaking. So if we boost this all the way up, you'll almost hear that mud. We don't want to cut too much out of the piano because that is our depth. That's what really gives it that pop. We can cut a lot out in the bass because in the bass we don't need that. It's more of the piano's job in this mix. So you can kind of, we'll A/B it real quick, so we'll turn it off on the bass and turn it back on so you can hear the difference. So you can hear it noticeably how it's very much in your face with the 200 hertz not taken out. And then when you take it out around 200 to 300, it's not as noticeable. So now that we have that, let's introduce the next piano. So I'm already starting to get an airy vibe from this piano anyway. So I think what we can do is add another EQ on piano number 2. And we can listen. You can also note the visualization if you haven't mixed before. A trick that I did learn a long time ago is you can actually scope when EQing. So what I mean by that is you grab one of these bells and you can actually scope through and see what frequencies sound really harsh and then turn them down. So that also has a 200 hertz range. We want piano 1 to be in that range. So this piano will turn down just a little bit. And we can cut out the other frequencies because there are none there. And we don't want any there anyway, because that's where the sub lives. Or the bass. That's where the bass lives, pretty much. The difference between piano 1 and piano 2 is piano 2 has more of a light feel, very airy feel. So we can actually bump up the high end on this one. The high end is right side. It doesn't sound that loud right now, but once we get to the next step, we can include volume adjustment too. So we'll do the same thing with the trumpet. Trumpet's more of a subtle instrument. It's not really a big deal. Some things you can get away without mixing 100%. I would advise against it all the time, but you should just use your ears and make sure that it's not that big of a deal if you don't mix something 100% in a song. So, like I said, scoping through the EQ, we can already see that there's a giant peak at 428 for the Vox Real. I think for this, just creatively, I'd like to duck this down a little bit more on the high end. So a big problem with this is when you actually turn the volume up, the peaks that are really high in the spectrum or that you hear will get even louder when you compress it or when you adjust the volume. That's the purpose of doing this, is so we don't have that. And you can actually adjust the band of this EQ going down here. To change the area of effect. Cool. So now I think we're ready to move on to compression. So you're probably wondering, what is compression? And compression is the way of, it is just, I'll give you an example. So if we zoom in here, we see this audio file. And we can see that it has a peak, which is up here, and then a valley, which is lower. It's basically just how the audio sounds. It's higher and lower, right? Just volume-wise. When you add a compressor, which I will add Fruity Limiter to show you visually how it works. And the way this works is You have your audio sample coming in here. I paused it by clicking on it. You have your audio sample coming in here. On Fruity Limiter, if you click on this compression tab here, this is what a compressor is. So you have threshold, a ratio, attack, release, sustain. Don't worry about noise gate. I'll go into that another time. So the threshold is from 0 all the way down to negative 60 dB on this compressor. And basically, the threshold is the highest point at which the audio should reach based on the other settings that you put. So visually, make this bigger. Visually, when you drag this down, you see this bar go down. And if you look in the top left, you'll see compression threshold, -5, all the way down to -60. So let's just play the audio and drag this down. So we'll meet it about here. You're wondering why is it not doing anything? I'll get to that. So we'll drag the threshold down. And this top bar here that you see is what really matters. And so this top bar here, if you see it go down and it hits the peak, is exactly what we're doing. We're trying to make the audio at a similar volume in each stage of the audio file, or whatever audio that you're playing in your DAW. We want to make it leveled. We want to make the low parts of the audio come up more and the high parts of the audio go down more. And that is done through a combination of the threshold, which is where we set the point at which we want the audio to be around, and then the ratio. So the ratio is for every 1 decibel, we get 1 decimal out. So for every 1 decibel, we get 1 decibel out. So if we turn that to the right, you'll see in the top right, it'll say for every 2 decibels, we get 1 decibel. For every 3 decibels, we get 1 decibel. For every 4 decibels, we get 1 decibel, and so forth. And you'll see the arm go down farther and farther. And then when you play it, you'll see this start to work. So this is the compressor. It's pushing down on that audio. If we lower the threshold with the ratio on, go down a little bit more, you'll see it compress even more. To give even more of an example, if we turn the threshold down even farther, you'll start to hear it. So a good range for this would be, we kind of want it to be leveled off, but not sound like it's being crushed. The knee helps with that because it kind of bends the arm down a little bit. We want the ratio not to be at 7. We could probably go around 3.1. If you do anything over 4, it's going to brick wall the audio. It's going to brick wall the sound wave, and it's going to sound pretty nasty when you start to finish your track. So let's just play that again and listen. All right, that sounds pretty decent. Once you have your threshold and your ratio and your knee where you want it to be, we'll move over to the attack and release. So attack is how long it takes the compressor to actually activate, and this is in milliseconds. So once it realizes that the audio hits and it needs to compress, it'll take a 20 millisecond wait before it actually compresses, or whatever you set this at. Normally I leave that at 0. It's not really useful unless you're dealing with certain instruments. Or I could turn it up just a little bit so you get that first initial hit of the piano. And then there's the release, which is how long the compressor will hold for when it is activated from the peak of the audio. So you'll notice that when you turn it down and it's a quicker release, nothing happens. because that's because it's only holding it for a short amount of time. If you turn it up, it'll hold it longer here. Each example is good for a different music type or instrument. I tend to leave this around the middle based on what I'm hearing. That sounds good. So now if we go back to the limit side over here down this way, we can turn the gain up after we compress. So we're going to A-B that real quick. This is with it off. So it brings the volume up a little bit more. Now we'll do the same for the rest of the instruments. So a compressor can be used to reduce loud noises as well. It's not really just meant to bring up soft noises too. It's kind of like evening the playing field. So if I normalize this trumpet that I have here, way too loud, unless you love it sounding like that. So if we double click on, unless you like sounding it like that, we can double click on the limiter and we see that's loud as hell. You can adjust the volume here on the mixer, but you can also hit play. And let's say we want it to sound like distorted for whatever reason. Maybe you like it that way. We would just turn the ratio all the way up and it'll actually brick wall and try and limit where that sound is trying to escape. So by pushing down on this. Just a proof of concept thing. Not really a huge fan of the trumpet on the sample. So now we'll go down to the violin. The violin is probably the most quiet instrument we have so far. So we do actually want to bring that up so we're able to use the compressor with it. So if we hit normalize, it'll bring the peaks up. All right, so now we're gonna actually use the limiter. Be wary. If you do have reverb on a track and you compress it, you're also compressing the reverb too. Sounds decent. So you notice how everything else sounds more quiet. So you notice when you turn it up, you probably want to change some of the frequencies around too. Remember the thing that I talked about, that if you compress it, it'll actually bring up the bad frequencies too. You can also switch around the EQ too. I've heard that people need to compress and then change the EQ afterwards. So you're not EQing, you're not compressing what you did. It'll just raise the volume up. Sounds better on this one. So now that we have everything compressed, we normally should level everything before, but since it was so quiet, we can probably do that now. Cool. Preset drums like these are normally, you don't have to do anything to them. I think most of the time we will have drums, but you should probably just level them all off, mostly at the same volume, and compress them normally. Like if this is just a loop and you can see all the peaks are the same, so you can probably get away with just either brick walling it or turning it up and limiting it. Just be careful though, because if you turn the release on too long, the low frequencies of the kick to be louder. So if you don't want that, turn the release down lower. If you don't want that, turn the release down lower. But we can also see that the snare and the kick are not the same volume. So in hip hop, that's normally a thing where you want them both to be similar volume. So let's say you like how that sounds, but you want to compress them all together. You select them all, you hold down Control Shift on Windows and just drag the left mouse over them. And then to route these all to a different track, you would, while that's held down with Control Shift, you right click here, route to this track only. What this will do is it'll send all of these to this track. and then that'll be sent to the master. And let's say you want to compress it again. Overcompression is not a terrible thing. You want to keep staging it, leveling it until you get that sound that's crisp. So let's add a parametric EQ on here. Even though we took those frequencies out, they're still pretty prominent. So now we'll add a limiter, well, more of a compressor. All right, so I have A-B'd this. A-B'ing is just playing it with or without the effects. And this is what we have on the Vox Reel. This is also the original. This is the original Vox Reel. I'm going to A-B it. And then this is it with my mixing, and it does sound a little less muddy if you listen to the 200 hertz range. Whatever you're listening to it on, it really depends. I have stereo headphones, so I'll be able to hear the difference. May not be perfect, but I just wanted to show you the basics of mixing. Compression and EQ is such an important part when it comes to mixing everything down. And in the next episode, I'll go over effects, basically effects, automation, and how to finish your track. All right. This FLP will be in the description. If you can make it sound better than me, please do. It takes me a long time to listen to something and find out what's wrong with it. So that's just the way I work. All right. Thanks for watching.